And I'll say good day to you this day of your time. How are you all? All right, thank you. Let us begin once again this transmission by thanking each and every one of you for the co-creation of this interaction and by expressing to you our gratitude and appreciation for giving us the gift of experiencing all of you, which expands our understanding of creation by learning through each and every one of you that many more ways that creation has of expressing itself. So we thank you for that gift. In return for this gift, we would now like to begin this transmission and entitle it Hall of Mirrors, which is where you live. Physical reality, as you call it, as we have said many times, is a reflection of your state of being, your state of consciousness. There really is nothing outside of you. You're not really in physical reality. Physical reality is within you. It's within your consciousness. It is a concept that you are experiencing of yourself from a certain perspective. However, we understand that the way in which you have chosen to experience your particular dimension of physical experience is as though you are within a realm of space and time, as you call it. But what is that exactly? What is space? What is time? Again, while they are illusionary, you still create the effect of them, the experience of them in your life experience as a physical being, a physicalized being, so to speak, where you have taken your energy, the high frequency energy of your spirit nature, your non-physical nature, and in a sense have lowered that frequency, crystallized that frequency down into what you call the experience, the matrix of, the structure of physical reality. Now again, this is going on within your consciousness. You're not actually in any place really called physical reality. It's all within. Nevertheless, we understand that the way you chose to experience this makes it appear to be outside of you. So the thing to remember in order to give yourself more opportunity to choose and experience the kind of physical reality you prefer, the kind of physical reality that you say is more in alignment with your true vibration, is to begin to see and experience physical reality as a reflection, similar to the idea of the reflection that exists in your glass mirrors. You know that when you look at your reflection in a glass mirror, you know that you're not really over there. And you know that if you want to change the reflection in the glass mirror, you don't go to the reflection and attempt to make it change. You must change yourself in order to see the change in the reflection. So, physical reality, being a reflection, being a hall of mirrors, operates in much the same kind of modality. Any change you wish to see in the so-called reflection, the outer reality, must begin within the inner reality, which is you, within your consciousness, within your vibration, within your state of being. Now, we understand that in having created this experience called physical reality and having imposed the idea of space and time upon your consciousness, that you have created also the concept called forgetfulness, where you have forgotten that physical reality is not real. But now, in this day and age, you are beginning to remember. That's what this exploration of consciousness, as you call it, is really all about. You're beginning to remember who and what you really are as a being, as a consciousness, and that you are creating, projecting this experience you call physical reality, that it's coming from within you. And so the more you begin to explore this, you find yourself attracted to a myriad of protocols and rituals and tools and techniques and, as we say, permission slips to give you the opportunity to remind yourselves, to remember that you are, in fact, creating all of this, that it's not really out there. It's not happening to you, it's happening through you. So, in these kinds of interactions, in this kind of download of information, we offer you yet one more perspective, a series of ideas, a series of thoughts, a series of points of view that can be used, can be applied in your reality, in your day-to-day physical reality, to aid and assist you in changing in ways that you prefer to, in experiencing life the way you prefer to. First of all, please understand that before we talk about the idea of these changes, and before we talk about the idea of what your mentality is, what your mind is, what your ego is, how you're having this experience, how you're framing it, how you're setting it up, we would like to remind you about the issue of change. Because the idea is not that you have to learn to change. You change all the time. As we have said, you change billions, literally billions of times per second. So quickly, so automatically, so fluidly, so smoothly, so effortlessly, you have forgotten that you're changing all the time. You have forgotten that the person you may be one moment is not the person you are in the next billionth of a second, or the billionth of a second after that, or after that, or after that. You literally become different people billions of times a second. Literally. This is not a metaphor. Literally. You become different people, billions of times a second. However, the shifts that you make, the changes that you're making automatically all the time are happening so smoothly, and the changes within one shift to another are so, in a sense, unnoticeable generally by you that you think you're still the same person. You create this illusion, this fluid illusion of continuity. Thus then, the idea is that you think you're not really changing very much. But the fact is you're changing totally and completely billions of times a second. So, the idea within all of this is not that you have to learn how to change. The idea is to learn how to define the next change so that it is different enough so that you can see the difference between the new change and the old one, and by that difference, reveal that you have changed immediately, instantaneously, and automatically. And to do that more and more and more so that you can understand that change is natural to you. It's happening all the time. It's a natural law of creation. All things change. Except the first three laws, of course. The idea in that sense is that you exist. That's the first law. The second law, the one is all, the all is one. That's the second law. The third is what you put out is what you get back. That's the third law. The fourth law is everything changes except the first three laws. And that's it. That's all any experience is based on, is those four laws. There are no others. A combination of these ideas are what give you every experience in every level and every dimension of being. Now, as we asked, what is space-time? Cursorily, it is, in a sense, as we said, a structure imposed upon your consciousness, upon the unbroken consciousness of your being, your spirit, your soul, if you wish. The space-time structure itself is your ego. There is no difference between what you call your physical ego mind and the space-time structure. The very existence, the very creation of space-time, of creating the idea of time and space, generates the ego itself. Because you need that perspective in order to experience space-time. An analogy would be, as we have said many times, the idea of a diving mask to explore under the water so you can see clearly. By going into physical reality, by changing your frequency to have a physical reality experience, it's like diving into your ocean. Without the idea of a mask, everything would be very murky. You need the focus so you can see clearly in the new realm, the new environment that you have projected yourself into, that you have, in that sense, dived into. So the ego is that mask. The ego is that lens through which you will experience the idea of physical reality. The ego's job, in a sense, the ego's definition, is just to keep you focused in the physical reality experience. Without that, you would not be capable of making sense out of the vibrations you call physical reality. So, that is why the ego structure is part and parcel of that nature, of that space-time structure. It's one and the same thing. As you create a space-time structure, you create an ego structure in order to experience it. They go hand in hand. They're simultaneously coexistent and co-created. Now, when we say ego structure, again, we don't necessarily mean it in the negative context, because we understand that many people on your planet experience the ego structure in what you call a negative way. The ego's basic job is not negative. In a sense, it's not even really positive per se. It's just neutral. It's just to keep you focused so you can have a physical experience. When the ego structure is given the label or defined as something that must do all of the creating in that experience, when it is given, in a sense, more than it was designed to do, when you stretch it and strain it beyond its design tolerances, so to speak, then it starts to fight back. Then it starts to resist. Then it starts to rebel. Oh, it will do what it can. It will do the best it can. But believe me, by overburdening it with something it was not designed to do, it builds up, in a sense, and I don't mean this emotionally, I mean this physically, it builds up a resistance, like a spring. When you press on it, it resists. It bounces back. The bouncing back is what you experience, in that sense, as resistance in your life, and the idea of the negative ego comes about when there is more and more and more pressure put on the ego to do what it wasn't designed to do, and it rebels and resists and bounces back harder and harder and harder and harder, until such time as that pressure, that resistance becomes the overwhelming signature frequency of the ego structure, and then it creates and generates the idea of a personality out of control, in fear, resisting the natural self because it no longer believes there is anything but the ego structure. Because the ego structure has been given so much energy, so much focus, it becomes the overwhelming, overriding vibration of your life, and it blots out the idea of your ability to remember that you are spirit, to reconnect with the higher mind, so on and so forth. This is why it is so important to relax the idea of the ego to a certain degree, to let it do its job, so that in allowing it to do only what it was designed to do, it can thus let you feel the communication coming through your imagination from the higher mind. Now, Nania, in a conversation recently, the individual you know as April, Nania, brought up some very, very wonderful questions that occur on your planet with respect to some of the ideas of manifesting what it is you prefer in your reality, based on some of the principles that we have talked about. And these questions had to do with what appear to be certain contradictions or misunderstandings of some of these principles. All of this comes from the idea and the notion that the only way to experience the personality is through the belief system that generates the emotions, that generates the thoughts and behaviors in your world. And so by having certain kinds of definitions within the personality structure, those definitions can cause confusion about how to apply some of these principles, or how to glean an understanding of the nature of the structure of existence sufficiently to be able to manifest what it is you prefer. So one of the things that we would like to do in this transmission is discuss the particular things that we have said and really explore more precise definitions for you so that there can be more clarity about how to use these principles in a way that will be able to allow you to see how you can manifest what it is that is the vibration of your preference. One of the things that was discussed is the idea that we have said many times, the idea being that to be in the present state is the most important thing over and above the idea of whatever circumstances are happening in physical reality. And the idea that, in a sense, you do not need to make things happen per se, you do not need to manipulate your reality. The idea is that your behavior simply is reflective of the state of being that you are, and thus generates the reflection in the reality. But at the same time, we have also talked about the importance, because you are physicalized beings, of taking physical actions. And so the question that arose was, are not certain actions themselves the idea of trying to engineer or trying to manipulate or trying to bring about a particular goal in reality? The short answer is no. The long explanation is as follows. We will use several analogies to illustrate this point and ideally create some more precise definitions to bring clarity. And this very sentence in and of itself, that we will use several analogies, will be something we will also refer to in a little while. The idea of actions, the idea in a sense of quote-unquote trying to make something happen, of in a sense attempting to guide your reality, force your reality down a certain path, doesn't really happen. The only reason it appears this way, when we talk about the idea of taking actions, is because there is a definition about those actions, a definition about the process, and a definition about the so-called result that are in some senses all confused together, all muddled together. So let us be clear. Many people, and I will be specific about the way the question was framed, attempt to negotiate for something, or are building a house. The question being then thus, when you're negotiating, aren't you attempting to have a certain outcome? Aren't you creating an expectation? Building a house, aren't you actually doing something to force your reality in a certain direction, to, in a sense, make something appear in your reality, being the house? No. The confusion comes from the idea, the confusion comes from the definition that the process, so to speak, is an end to a means, and it's not. Building a house is an experience unto itself. The house, living in it, is an experience unto itself. I know this doesn't make much sense right now in your linear space-time frame of reference, but building a house does not lead to living in the house. Let us give you now a couple of analogies to point out how this is actually so, and maybe this will start to free up some of your definitions that you have bought into for many years in your physical lifetime. One way to clarify some of the ideas of physical reality and the linear space-time framework you've created is to, for the purposes of the illustration, for the purposes of the analogy, eliminate the space-time reference so that you can create a perspective, and by that perspective, by that difference of having no space-time, see what is going on in space-time. Many of you already know that in spirit, there really is no time lag. As soon as you imagine something, as soon as you think of something, it appears. You experience it immediately. So let's take this analogy from the spirit perspective. This analogy of quote unquote, building a house. You all know that in spirit, because time does not exist in the same way, you can do anything in any order. So you could suddenly imagine yourself living in a house. Oh yes, here I am. Poof, there it is. I'm in it. I'm living in it. And then you could say, now I would like to experience the experience of building a house after living in the house. And poof, there you are, building a house. From the linear space-time perspective, seemingly backwards, making no sense. Well, how can you live in the house before you build the house? I don't get it. But the point of this illustration is to point out that these are individual events that really have no continuity connection. Each is its own experience, and the confusion will disappear when you define them as their own experiences, having no connection to another experience except the connection you create, which is another experience unto itself. So even though we understand that generally speaking, in linear space-time, you go about building a house in order to create a house, you are actually not using the building of the house, not mechanically, to actually create the house. What you're doing is creating the experience of building a house for its own sake, on its own terms, as a reality experience. The belief systems that you have bought into, the generally agreed upon beliefs of the consensus reality that you have bought into, simply says and simply creates beliefs within you that say, I can't just manifest the house. I have to build it first. I have to have the experience called building a house before I can manifest the house. But the experience of building the house is really its own experience, its own manifestation. And when the house is there, that actually is a completely different, separate reality manifestation. But you make a connection between the two because of the belief system framework within your consciousness, within your ego structure. If you can begin to look at every single moment as its own reality for its own sake, with its own definition of being a moment equal to all other moments of experience, you can start to break this continuity experience down. You can begin to dissolve it so that you actually can begin, if you want to, if you prefer to, if there is need to, if there's relevance to, you can actually begin to see skippages, if you will, in space and time. You can actually leap over certain steps and start to manifest things in a way that precludes the need for what you heretofore called the necessary means to the end or the process. However, one of the reasons you designed the experience of physical reality was to experience the idea called process, was to experience that for its own sake. So the idea is that many beings actually learn something of themselves by having the experience, by creating the experience with their belief systems of building a house. That's something they believe they require, that they prefer in order to learn certain things to grow as a being, to grow as a spirit, to grow as a consciousness. When you understand it that way, then it's all well and good to know that you're creating the experience of that leading to the house, but what we're describing here is the actual mechanical reality. The building of the house and the living of the house are two completely different events that are not really created in that sense to be linked until you link them. Let us give you another analogy, perhaps again to help clarify this issue. You are at one of your fine earth restaurants. The server comes up to you and says, "What would you like to drink?" You order your drink. "May I interest you in an appetizer?" You order your appetizer. "What would you like as your main course?" You order your main course. "Can I interest you in a little dessert?" You order your dessert. "Would you like some coffee, tea, or an after-dinner drink?" You order that and are satisfied with the continuity of your meal from beginning to end. All right, now let's go into a parallel reality restaurant in a more metaphysical world. The metaphysical server comes up and the first thing they say is, "Would you like an after-dinner drink?" "Well, wait a minute, you say. I just came from this other reality where first they ask you if you'd like something to drink before the meal. I haven't gotten to the after-dinner drink yet. I haven't had the dinner yet." "So," says the waiter, "can you not order an after-dinner drink before the dinner? Why not?" And you go, "Well, I suppose I could." "And then would you like dessert, or would you like the appetizer last? Or in what order would you actually prefer the meal?" "Well, you know, now that you mention it, I guess I could change some things up into a different order. I guess I don't have to go by that structure." Each portion of the meal is its own thing and does not have to be ordered in order. The idea, again, is that each experience in your reality can be shuffled around. It's just that more often than not, you don't prefer to, because you've agreed to abide by certain consensus reality rules that give you the opportunity to create with your belief systems certain kinds of events, certain kinds of experiences that will give you an understanding of creation, an understanding of what you call process, the process of creation, the experience of the act of creation, rather than the simple, instantaneous, simultaneous existence of something. This is one of the definitions of physical reality, is the experience of that act of creation. But we understand that you can become confused about how one may seem to lead to the other, but they don't. When you can simply experience the idea for its own sake as its own event, then you will begin to unlock, disconnect, detach from the need to be goal-oriented, because that's what's happening. When you look at an event as an end in that sense, or when you look at an event as a means to an end, you are labeling them in ways that connect them in continuity. But when you look at everything as an end unto itself, as an experience unto itself, you break that continuity connection and thus then don't have to experience it as much in that old order, in that way. The other example that was brought up, thank you, Nania, was the idea of negotiation. Aren't you trying to get what you want? In a sense. But the idea, again, is you cannot really look at negotiation as a means to an end. Negotiation is an opportunity, since many of you consider the ideal negotiation to be what you call a win-win situation. It's an opportunity to explore together ways to change your own belief system about who you are and what your reality is about, in such a manner that you're also helping the other people in the negotiation do the same thing for themselves, so that everyone becomes more of who they are and can experience the reflection of that discovery. But it's not about getting that thing, getting that result, achieving that goal, getting what you want. It's about having an experience called a negotiation. It doesn't lead to something else. It is its own thing. And it's an opportunity to change your own beliefs so that you then become the vibration that will automatically attract whatever you have become the vibration of. So actions that you take, behaviors that you exhibit, are simply physicalized reflections, physicalized, shall we say, expressions of the vibrational state you happen to be in. The actions that you take aren't getting you the thing physically, mechanically. They are expressions of the state of being you are in, so the universe can, in a sense, recognize the state in a physical sense and give you a physical reflection. The actions are not the idea of forcing something into being. That's the language of expectation. That's the language of goal orientation. That's the language of means to an end. When you understand everything and every single moment is its own end, is its own experience with no connection to anything else, then you can stay in the moment with it. You can really appreciate the experience for what it is and erase from your consciousness the idea that it's supposed to take you somewhere else, because the most important thing is to stay completely present. We understand also, again, that because of your experience many times with physical reality and the belief systems that you have chosen to hold on to, that it may make the idea of remembering many of these principles seem to be difficult, but it really is not. True understanding comes from the ability to remember simply more than one of these principles at the same time. So when we talk about, as we have for many years, the idea of stay present, stay in the moment, when we talk about the idea of drop your expectations, when we talk about the idea of taking action in the direction of your excitement without expectation, and when we talk about the idea and all these other ideas of what manifestation is, the idea is that when you go about thus then being who you say you prefer to be, the idea is to give yourself the ability to remember all of the principles at the same time, not just one, not just two. Then you have true understanding of the idea, of the structure, of the nature of your existence. We understand that this can, again, in your belief system, take a little practice, and that's all right. You're getting better at it, because if you weren't, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But the idea is that you can begin to truly incorporate these principles of being in the moment more fully, so that when such ideas come up as isn't taking an action, actually, in a sense, creating an expectation, you can answer the question yourself, no. Because the idea of being in the moment is that there is no separation between action, between behavior, and the thing itself. You're simply reflecting the vibration that you are for its own sake, because that's who you are, not because the action will get you something somewhere down the road in the future, which doesn't exist, which is an illusion. The more you allow yourself to apply all these principles in the present, and see everything and define, most importantly, define everything as distinctly its own experience in the present for its own sake, for what it is you get out of it, and have no concern for anything else, don't connect it to anything else, then your life becomes an ecstatic explosion of synchronicity where everything starts to fall into place. It doesn't mean, again, you take no action. But the actions are not getting you those things. The actions are simply, in a sense, a verification, a physical verification, a physical expression of the frequency that you prefer to be in. That's what it is. Now, in that regard, with that respect, with these things in mind, as you say, you can begin to see more and more the hall of mirrors you have set up for yourself. And when you have this reflection bouncing off that reflection and that reflection bouncing into that reflection, when you don't clearly define what these reflections are, yes, we understand. It can be very confusing. You can lose your way, so to speak. You can get lost in the reflections and wonder why this isn't working or that isn't working, because it's getting all muddled up. And pretty soon you don't know what you are and what the reflections are. You don't know who you really are because you're so confused by all the reflections. But when you start to impose clear definitions on who you really are at this moment and nothing else, every experience at this moment and nothing else, things start to clear up. You start to see through the glass. You start to see the path. You start to be able to go through the maze easily. It's no longer a maze. It just becomes amazing. The idea is to really look at yourselves always from the present. To really understand that that's the only place you exist. That's it. Right here, right now, that's all there is. You and the reflections you create in your own hall of mirrors, the degree of clarity of those mirrors depends upon the degree of clarity of your definitions of yourself and everything that you experience. Give them clear definitions. Assign clear definitions to everything. Don't assume you know how to, in any way, shape, or form, define something just because you think you have a definition. Don't assume that's the best definition you could have. Don't assume that's the definition that is most aligned with your true spirit. Be inventive, be imaginative, explore at every moment that you're having an experience. Do I have the best definition I can have of this experience for me? Do I have the most clear definition I can have of this experience? Right here, nothing else exists, right here, right now, that I can possibly have. Take that time, take that space, and fill it with a definition that is really clear, really precise, really pristine, so that you can bring to bear all these things that we have talked about all at once, so you will not be confused. Does this help provide some clarity, Nania?
Could you give an example of one, of clearly defining one?
Well, as we said, the idea that some people have a definition that the experience of building a house is an end to a means instead of defining it in that sense, or a means to an end instead of defining it in that sense as an experience, as an end unto itself with no connection to the idea that a house has to result. That the experience of building a house is its own reality, its own experience. Defining it that way, instead of as a means to an end, will allow you to be present with it and get out of it everything that you actually designed it for, everything you created that experience for. Whereas if you're simply using it as a means to an end, many of you become very impatient. You shoot right through it. You miss all the things you set up for yourself to learn by having created that experience with your belief system. You don't learn as much about yourself by thinking that you're supposed to be getting somewhere else. I've just got to finish that house. Oh, I wish I didn't have to build it. I've just got to hurry up and finish that house so I can start living in it. I've just got to hurry up and get through this process so I can get what I want. And in fact, you're actually ignoring the very experience that you designed for yourself to learn by, the process itself. You understand? Every moment, you're creating what you're experiencing. Don't ignore it. Don't set it aside. Don't shove it off. Don't send it to camp. Experience it and define it. Find the definition of the experience you're having that works in the present. And bring to bear all the principles at once that we have discussed at the same time. Now, we will do other things to help lock this in more and more in many ways. But this, what we are talking about now in this transmission, can also be considered an adjunct to something that we discussed before, which is the whole concept of manifestation. Again, this goes hand in hand with many of your old world definitions that a manifestation is something that you try to create. Listen to another definition. Once again, remember, manifestation is not the creation, nor even in a sense really the attraction of something to you that isn't here already. It's already here. Everything is already here. Everything exists here and now. Manifestation is the experience of being the vibratory state that allows you to perceive, to make visible what is already here, but invisible to you in the state you're in now. It's already here. You don't have to pull it from the future. Way out there in the netherworld, the foggy, far future. It is here now. So this idea dovetails perfectly with what we are saying in terms of taking every experience for its own sake, right here, right now in the present, defining it that way, right here, right now, with no concern for anything else, because the idea of any visualization you may have created to symbolize what you prefer, which again is fine as a technique, fine as a permission slip, as long as you don't bring the expectation in it, as long as you don't label it as a means to an end. The visualization can represent the idea of the reality that you are manifesting, that represents your true preferred self, your true preferred life, your true preferred reality. But the idea is that that reality already exists. And by trusting and allowing and having what you call faith and knowledge in the idea of whatever it is you're experiencing now as being a part of that experience and not just a pathway to it, but a part of that experience, you will experience it more fully. And by experiencing what is going on right now for its own sake more fully, you will change your vibration to be that which is more capable of rendering visible the reality that is already here, but invisible to you at the moment. So you don't have to go out there to get it in that sense. But the actions that you do, the actions that you take, the behaviors that you express that are hand in hand with the vibrational state that you're in, because that's automatic. Whatever vibrational state you're in, you automatically exhibit behaviors that are germane to that state. So this is why it is important to have those behaviors, because again, they are germane to the state in physical reality terms. And thus then when you do that, when you behave the state, you make it more and more and more probable for you to see the reality that is vibrationally representative of that state. That's what manifestation is. It's just removing blinders. It's just changing your frequency to something, to a reality, to a parallel world that already exists and already contains the symbol that represents your ideal life. The experience that already represents that. Because remember again, it's not really real. It's just an experience. So all you're doing is changing your channels, changing your frequencies to get a different program, to be able to see it. But the surest way not to see it is to ignore what's going on now as if it's only somehow a means to an end. It is its own thing. And it's there for a reason, your reason. The only way to learn how to accelerate that, how to use it in a different way more efficiently, is to use it. Is to define it as something that's important to use for its own sake. And don't connect it to some sort of expectation or outcome. That's the easy way of it. That's the effortless way of it. Does this make some sense? All right. Let it sink in. It will make more and more sense. And later in this transmission, we will again do things that will help lock it in through visualizations and meditations. But know that from this point forward, as you say in space and time, you can allow your ego structure to begin to relax its need to get where it thinks it needs to be, and allow it to just be with the rest of you, which is right here and right now. Let it do its job. Don't overburden it. Let it do the job it was designed to do. Let the higher mind do the job it was designed to do. Work in concert. Be here now. Be in joy.